Welcome to Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners. I'm your host, Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and I'd like to welcome Lisa Alley-Zarkades.
Nice.
Lisa, welcome to
Yeah,
Healthy
thank you
Pets,
very much
Healthy.
for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's our pleasure. I'm very excited for you to be here. Lisa came in from California, and Lisa is the Vice President of Commercial Development for E.T. Horn, but she's of the Animal Wellness Division. And of course, we know that that holds dear to a lot of our hearts, the animal wellness. And I met Lisa probably 2 years ago, I believe now.
Yes.
And we'll talk a little later about that specific thing. But there's something interesting that Lisa had done in her history with was it always with Horn?
Yeah, I've spent 26 years with the Horn Company. I've worked a couple other places as well.
You were in the food development division of Horn, and wondered, like, what is the food development division? You think of food as maybe an apple that you pull off a tree, or a hamburger that you take out of a package, but there's a science to food.
Yes.
And would you tell us a little bit, Lisa, what that science means and what that is and what it means to us?
Okay. Yeah, well, foods that you prepare at home, in some ways you are creating a science experiment when you bake and you fry and you stir something on the pot or you make candy. So what makes it different about doing it in volume and for a number of people for a product that's going to be a finished product is there's a lot that goes into it. Obviously, it has to be safe. It has to be put in a package that is appropriate. It has to be able to be shipped around the country, may undergo heating, could be frozen and then thawed. And so there's a number of circumstances that eventually when the consumer gets the product, it may not look like the original product. So product development is where we focused our time, and there's a whole science behind how to make a product work at the pilot, at the bench, at the pilot, in production, and then in distribution. And that's food science.
So you want a safe package, something that's not going to leach into the product and change and alter its chemical makeup or become a toxin?
Well, safety has to do really about if there's yeast and mold growing in the product.
All right.
If the product package is breached, then obviously you can have bacteria get in there. Fats can go rancid. So there's a number of things to keep the product safe. Certainly you want to prevent any contamination due to bacteria, as you know, that's in the news all the time.
Yes, right.
So this is all about providing food that's safe. Also, it has to still taste good, the texture has to be what you expect, and it has to look appealing. So there's quite a bit that goes into that.
So you have a laboratory setup, or a kitchen, laboratory and or kitchen setup, that type of operation?
Most companies have a research facility at their plant, and these people all wear their little white coats, and they have a really nice kitchen, but it looks like a lab, and they have all the different pieces of equipment to evaluate the process along the way, and they test things, and they might test the viscosity, they might test how much something compresses or if it breaks too easily. There's all these different tests you can do depending on what's a baked good or if it's a protein bar or it's a beverage. And then you have to do a pilot scale up.
Which means what?
Which means now you've made it on the bench. What happens when you make it in the plant? Well, if you've ever made a double batch of cookies, you probably have experienced this, that your recipe changes when you upscale to a larger volume. So this definitely happens in a plant.
Because that changes cooking time.
So you have to make it in the pilot batch, and then to actually have it transfer to work in the full production scale. Everything has to run smoothly. You don't want the line to go down. You don't want to have things back up. You know, you've got to keep. To be efficient, you have to keep production going until it gets all the way packaged, sitting on a pallet, and gets ready to put into storage before shipping.
You brought up something that triggered a thought in my head and a memory. I couldn't cook for anything. And when you hear that old adage, you can't boil water, well, I was pretty close to that. And I hated to cook. And I've actually, over the years, become a good cook. And it happened when I realized, and of course, having a medical degree, you spend so much time in a laboratory in chemistry and biology and so forth. And when I realized that cooking is nothing more than chemistry, it changed my whole attitude toward it. And I actually started having fun figuring out how I can do things to make them taste different or whatever. And baking I can't do, and I probably would never never attempt to do. But cooking is actually become fun when you look at it as chemistry, and it is. Yes. So you put too much of one ingredient and changes the whole product that you're making. And that's really what chemistry is.
Right, and the browning reaction, which we all love, which includes baking and that nice brown texture that you get, and barbecuing is a browning reaction. All these things are experiences we expect, and to have it happen correctly in a facility and get to you, you want, when you get that product, you want it to be like you expect, the convenience of it. Right?
It's the consistency.
And the consistency. Every time you buy that product, you know, it should be pretty much the same. Every time you go to a, you know, grocery store, or you go to a fast food restaurant, a regular restaurant, food science is behind all of that. And when there's a problem is when you hear about it on the news, when there's been a breakdown in somewhere in the process. Or you get a product and you say, what happened to it? And you should call and report it to the manufacturer, because that's how they sometimes can identify a problem that they didn't catch.
So if I had an idea to come up with a sports bar, let's say a sports bar, that's not what I want to say, a eatable, nutritional exercise bar, let's call it that.
Okay.
I have an idea in my head, but I really don't know how to put the ingredients together properly. So I would come to you in your facility, and then you would map out a plan of how we do that.
Well, I would say in particular, our company, even though we're an ingredient supplier, most of the people on our staff are food scientists, so they do understand formulation, and we could guide you to where you could get that made, and we could recommend ingredients that would have a probability of success. There's many challenges with certain, in particular, protein bars.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, protein bars, you're putting a high level of protein, and when you do that, the bars get very hard over time. And you go to the store, and I always check, and if the bar is just so hard, I'm not eating that, because it also won't taste as good. It's changed. So there's technology that comes along to keep the bar soft and still have it taste good. So there's a lot of tweaking that goes on.
And what you were saying, you're an ingredient supplier, so you source the ingredients that I would be requiring in my protein bar?
Well, we represent, as a company, we tend to represent the number 1 or number 2 in their field in a particular ingredient category. And these are people that have done their due diligence. They've got the science behind their product. They have all the safety, the HACCP. We know that they're a reliable supplier as an ingredient. And then we take their product and their innovation, and we help get it into the marketplace. Okay. Let's just say we can solve a new problem with keeping the bar moist. We say we have this new ingredient, let's just say it's a starch that helps it stay soft. So we would go to a client and say, we can help you with this problem you're having, and you'll get another year's shelf life out of your bar, and it will stay soft. Those are the kind of problem solving we do. So new ingredients can help solve existing problems for texture. Now that's strictly talking about getting the product to stay in the form you want it. Right. Not as much talking about the nutrition side, because that's a whole nother consideration, is what do you want to do nutritionally in your product. And
you aid with that as well, the company?
Right, because generally they go together. And we call this a functional food. And we talked about that earlier, is that people now rely on, like protein bars, nutrition bars, for a source of energy and nutrition. On the go, I want to eat something quick. I just don't want it to be simple calories. I want a little protein, a little carb, a little fat. What can I eat that's, that right combination, doesn't maintain your blood sugar? Is there added nutrition to it? By the way, I'm going to get some extra antioxidants or some extra immune benefit from the product. And so I'm not like eating a candy bar. It's a better choice over a candy bar. Right. You're going to have regular food at your next meal, but this is something that more and more people do, to eat small meals and have a quick little
booster.
So that's why it's a huge category in the store. Yeah. And so we help all these bar people with new ideas. People get tired of a flavor or a texture, and so they want to change it with something new, and so we're always thinking what is coming next.
What's the average time span to make that change, or actually to formulate a whole new product like that?
Well, it can take a year or 2 years. It depends on the company, but besides getting the formula right, then you have to do all the shelf stability testing, and you have to prove out that the product will actually work over time through the distribution channel and sitting on the shelf when you pick it up. And then you're going to take it home, and let's say you have it in your backpack for 3 days, and then you finally eat it. I mean, so there's all these things to consider.
Or throw it in your backpack, and a year later you find out, oh, I forgot to eat that. It's still there. Yeah.
So, and it's probably as safe to eat. It may just be squished and melted by that point, but the texture won't be as good.
So they'll make certain batches one way, and then make an adjustment, and come to a product there, and they keep doing it until they pick the right one. Is that pretty much how it's done?
Yeah, there's a lot of the trials are done on the bench, or they say on the bench in the lab, and then they're also done in a pilot test. And they have a lot of confidence, they go to production. And then when they go to production, then there's a lot of QCing and testing, and they might then introduce the product in a geographical area and kind of get the response and see what people like it or don't like it. They do consumer testing as well to say, do you like how it looks with this color and this background, because they want to take away anything that might influence you, because they're looking for a very specific sensory.
They have you for like 3 seconds at the most.
There's people that are trained just in sensory testing,
so
picking panels.
How do you know if it tastes good?
Well, that's definitely up to the person tasting the product, because I can like something, but what's the palate of your consumer?
Well, when you're developing this product and you're about to bring it to market, and you take it off the bench and it's in production, who has decided that it has a good taste, a good flavor?
Well, hopefully your consumer studies have demonstrated that. You also do take the product out into the marketplace. You may have giveaways. You may go to a trade show and have people sample the product. There's a number of ways to kind of get feedback.
Okay.
But for larger companies, I usually do some kind of official consumer testing, and they get the results back and say, oh, it was too sweet, wasn't sweet enough, it had an off flavor.
After bite.
Aftertaste. The texture wasn't, it depends what the actual evaluation was being done and get the reaction.
I've purchased some things that said great tasting, and I buy it, I bite into it, and I go, oh.
Yes.
Whose concept was that?
Those things do happen, and that's sometimes people are under pressure to launch, and they've made promises, and so maybe they have not vetted fully that it's not going to be everybody's preference. And there are some people that love certain products. I have never been a fan of Power Bar, but I know people, they love Power Bar and they eat them. So, there is a varied client out there.
Yeah. I was never big on those either.
Right.
I found them kind of hard to chew. So
but there's people that love them.
Yeah. So you could do this with a Power Bar type item. You can do it with a brownie type item as well.
Yes, it would be a functional food can be. You can take a chocolate, and we've done this. We've demonstrated this at trade shows, which I think is fun. Is to make a very nice truffle, and add a couple of functional ingredients to it, like L-carnitine or DHA, and say you're going to get your part of your daily requirement for these ingredients, and you can't taste it in the product. And that's to demonstrate that there's a way to deliver added nutrition in something you like.
To take the guilt out of the chocolate?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we tell them.
Yeah.
You don't have to feel guilty, and that the calories don't count as much. But it's just kind of to show a concept that you can supplement foods and still taste good.
Do you do this also with things like toothpaste?
Well, I'm not I say on the
We're off the
science
food a little bit,
but toothpaste is a whole nother, it has developed in a whole nother way. I have to say, I know that there's different abrasion type ingredients that help with the cleaning of the teeth. Only thing is you don't, you're not supposed to swallow the toothpaste. You're supposed to spit it out.
most of it's toxic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't want to divert off that.
Yeah.
I was just kind of curious if you were involved in any of those things like that.
Yeah, sometimes I just know that they're trying different silicas and whatnot to maybe help with some of the abrasion or not, as you know, to protect the teeth.
Could you give us just a short list of some of these products that you've worked on?
In terms of the raw material?
Yes,
okay.
and how that works.
Well, for the structure of the product, so much of it depends on the physical nature, or think of the building blocks of the product to actually sit there and stay stable. So those usually require proteins, requires carbohydrates, and fat. Most foods have some combination of that. And so you want to find the right set of those ingredients in order to provide the correct structure. So in the case of a baked good, if it's a croissant, you need a lot of fat in the product in order to make it flaky and very nice and stay that way. If you're going to make a baked good, some of them have more water and flour, and some have more fat added to them. But the problem with your standard raw materials in your kitchen is they don't really work in production. They break down, they won't hold the integrity of the product. So that's why there's a lot of science behind ingredients, because you're trying to take a starch and find out the best way to get that product to gel at the right time, to set at the right time, to bake out at the right time. So I sold just starches for 6 years. My background is starch chemistry, and there's a lot of science behind it.
I would have never knew that existed.
And there's all different sources of starch, from potato, from corn, from wheat, from rice, from tapioca, and they all act different. They're little granule before it swells. They look different under the microscope. They swell differently. They break differently. And so if it breaks, now perfect examples when you make pudding with cornstarch, and you go to put it in your refrigerator, and the next day you go, what's that puddle of water on the top? Well, the natural hydrogen bonds all want to come back together, and they just squeeze the water out, and so now you have the breakage of the starch gel. And that's just what it does. So you don't want that to happen in production, because then you'd have a failed product. So.
And then heat affects every one of those differently?
Yes, and heat is very important. So is pH, because pH can drastically change how the proteins interact, and also what happens with the starches. Acid environment is safer for food production. So if you want to not worry about bad things growing, foods that are under 4.5 pH, you don't have to worry about the bad bacteria.
Because acidity, not in the body, but acidity outside the body does kill bacteria and virus and fungus,
But a lot of foods are more neutral pH, so then you have to build in this safety factor so that when you get the product, you don't have contamination, which is very dangerous.
So you add such things like citric acid or something to that effect?
You can acidify the product. You can control the moisture of the product. If you lower the moisture content in the formula, there's less water available to the microorganisms to grow. So it's called water activity. You can add more salt, which was typically what was done for many years before food science really developed. Is people, how did they preserve their foods?
Salt.
They added a lot of sugar and a lot of salt, which the microbes say that's not a good environment for them. The water's not as available for them to grow. And then the other way was to dry a product and smoke a product. And that's why you have products that you can keep for so long. And canning was really our first attempt to really get shelf stability. When you have all this produce and coming in, and then you don't want to throw it out, how do you save some of it? So canning became popular. And then the invention of frozen foods was significant, because it allowed us to take vegetables at their peak, freeze them, and now they have freezing and drying at the same time.
Which is a whole nother.
Yeah, which makes it much better. They rehydrate better, they bake out better, they cook up better. So all these things allow the foods, in order to get them at their peak time, keep them safe, and then still have the texture and the mouthfeel and the flavor that you want.
So the freeze-dried has a very extensive shelf life.
Yes, because you've taken the moisture way down and you dried it at the right time, the peakness of the vegetable, and so, or fruit. So it's a significant improvement, and you probably noticed that the frozen food section has greatly expanded because there's so much more we can do to get a quality product.
It still looks good and appetizing.
Right, and still handles all the mishandling, even you taking it home and letting it thaw out in your car before you get it in your house. And so there's a lot of abuse, and you have to plan that into your food.
Yeah, I'm a fan of freeze-dried items, and
Yeah,
the dogs freeze-dried briskets. I even get I'm dry. The lights are drying us out right now. I think you're having the same problem a little bit. And we'll get some water here maybe in a minute. But the freeze-dried food I like very much, and I add a little bit of water to it.
Right.
And I like high pH water, and it just reconstitutes and is palatable and smells nice and everything.
Well, a lot of things came along because of us trying to do things during difficult times. One was during the wars, where how do we feed all these men and get them their rations and that they don't get poisoned by them.
Right.
And so a lot of technology developed in those days, and then other thing is the space program.
Yes.
Created a lot of new opportunities to have, how do we have something that you can take somewhere and just add water to it and have it turn out. And then backpacking food. That was a huge trend, still is. You know, how do you have a meal ready to prepare on a mountaintop, you know, that you have to carry up with you and just add water and heat it.
And I've seen like freeze-dried ice cream, and you look
Yes.
at that and you go, how can that be good? But it actually is once you reconstitute it.
Right,
So,
right.
And then now there's the food storage for calamity. That's big business. And I don't know if you've dwelled into that a little bit, but a lot of that is freeze-dried food.
Yes, and I'm sure that the technology today is very important for that, because I think a lot of people are planning to have a great storage of food somewhere, and so if it goes bad, you can't eat it.
Yeah. How did your knowledge and your training in this commercial food, let's call it that, just for lack of a better term, change what you do at home?
It's a very good question, because I really learned that I wanted to prepare more fresh as much as possible. I mean, I think that convenience is great, but I don't want to just rely on convenience. That I want to enjoy the preparation process. And then sometimes it's nice having a step that's shortened by a convenience item that I can add to. So I think that's you know, we're all busy. We all want to eat a variety. We want to eat fresh as much as possible. How do we get it all to happen? And today there's a lot more choices for consumers to make the food have a partial involvement in the step. And then if you just don't have time, you know, you pop something in the oven, and it's just already prepared for you.
So do you pick packages up and go like, oh, I don't know, I don't think I want to eat that?
Well, I mostly look at the calorie content because there's a lot of hidden calories in foods. There's quite a bit of fat, salt and sugar, which makes it taste good, but you have to I like to look at the calorie content and say, okay, this have protein in it. Does it have a good fat? I want to tend to eat more of the monosaturate fats versus the saturated fats.
Yeah.
You know, what is the source of protein? I'm a vegetarian, so I want to know what the source of protein is. And then if it's really salty, I just don't personally care for a lot of salt, so I look at that as well.
Yeah. And my favorite fat is coconut oil.
You like coconut oil?
I love coconut oil. I put it in my eggs. I'll put it in a cup of coffee. And it's so good for you, coconut oil. And a lot of people say, well, it'll change the flavor, and I don't notice the difference, but I love coconut oil.
We do a whole piece infographic on coconut oil and palm oil, and then what people are really looking for is the MCTs in coconut oil.
What is an MCT?
It's a medium chain triglyceride, and so it's important to know how much is in the coconut oil, because if you're trying to get those, you're almost better off just buying the MCT, because then you can get it, and you only need like a teaspoon of it, and you can buy MCT in the marketplace, and it's very easy to add to your foods, and then you won't be getting as many calories, and maybe you won't get as many of the saturated fats. So the medium chain triglycerides are what they're really finding is good for cognition and weight control. And so the bodybuilders, you see they use the MCTs, but doctors, as you know, use MCTs when a person can't digest food. MCTs do not have to be digested. They go right to the liver. It's an immediate source of energy.
Yeah, well, another good fat, and of course I always tend to go for organic and extra virgin and so forth, but olive oil, I like olive oil a lot as well, and good quality organic butter. Just as a vegetarian, you probably wouldn't use butter, but it is really beneficial for you. And so
I'm a big fan of olive oil, and definitely you look at a whole set of societies in the Mediterranean that have been living on it and eating quite a bit of it, and you just have to wonder why they don't have some of the same health problems that we do.
Exactly.
And it's a great fat, and it's good to have the extra virgin first
That's
press.
that first press, and you're getting all the nutrients and all the benefits, and it's not being watered down or so forth. And
if it's a little too strong in flavor, sometimes for cooking, you can actually mix it with another oil if some people don't want the strong olive oil flavor.
So Horn is located where? I didn't ask you that.
Horn is located in La Mirada, California, which isn't too far from Disneyland in Anaheim.
Been there, done that.
It's Orange County, right on the border with LA County.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area of the state, and lots of sunshine, and ocean's not that far away.
Not that far away, and also it's it's great for commerce right there. There's quite a bit of industry that when you can access different parts of the Southern California market very quickly, and there's a lot of rail spurs around there, which
that's
are
what I was
really
going to say.
important.
And then you have a couple airports that you can run to, and it's a nice area there. So, well, Lisa, we're coming to the close of our show.
All right.
And I want to thank you so much for coming on to Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners.
Thank you.
The knowledge that you have gives us such great insight and things that we don't think about, because we're used to just walking into a store, seeing how pretty the packaging is, grabbing it and taking it home. And it's interesting to hear what's really behind the scenes of what we're eating. And I think a lot of it is an eye-opener, because you don't think about it. And
well, we're looking for new food scientists, so please, the youth of America, come to the food industry. We need more people interested in food science, and that'd be terrific.
The science of food.
That's right.
The chemistry of food. Well, thank you again, Lisa, for being on on the show. Thank you for watching Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners. I'm your host, Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and we had the honor of having Lisa Alley-Zarkades all the way from sunshiny California. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. Remember, a healthy pet is a happy pet, and a happy and healthy owner.